Hey everybody, I'm going to be showing you how to use a lifeline in your knitting, and I'm going to be showing you how to do it proactively, which means you go ahead and insert the lifeline before you actually need it, planning for a possible mistake down the road, just to save yourself from hours of losing work, having to rip back or whatever. So there are many ways that you can insert a lifeline. The easiest way, and the way I'm going to show you today, is by using your interchangeable needles. Most of the interchangeable needles have that little hole at the base of the metal there, the connector. And so all I did was insert some dental floss, and I prefer wax. I just inserted that and double knotted it, pulled it pretty tight, so that is running through that needle there. And this is my working needle without all the stitches on it. So I'm going to go ahead and just knit this row and show you how it's going to work. And as I do that, I'm going to talk to you about just some tips that I have found helpful. So whenever I use a lifeline, it's typically before a big lace section, a section maybe that I don't want to have to worry about ripping back, or a section I'm not all that confident about. So before a big lace section, in a garter row, preferably a row or two before you start the lace section, I insert a lifeline. And before I do that, I mark in my pattern which row I am inserting the lifeline in. Because if you do have to rip back to where your lifeline is, you're going to want to know where in the pattern that was. And if you don't write it down, it may be hard to read your work and figure out exactly where that was. And sometimes it matters, sometimes it really doesn't. So I have now knit the row. I'm now on the needle where the dental floss is tied to. And so the great thing is, all you have to do is pull your stitches down, and now they are resting on that lifeline, on that dental floss. And now I have an effortless lifeline running through my stitches. So just like my cable is running through these stitches, so is the lifeline. So it's kind of like a cable, if you will, but it's going to stay on this particular row that I chose to knit it in. So then what you want to do is just snip the dental floss out of your needle. Okay, so once you have snipped the dental floss out of the little hole that you tied it into, you can see it's just running through your knitting now. I like to tie stitch markers or rings to the ends, so that as you're knitting, just in case your dental floss makes its way through and just kind of works its way down, it'll have a place to kind of stop it from wiggling out of your row there, out of your knitting. I've had that happen before, and I had to go back to yet a previous lifeline, and that's a little disheartening. So make sure first of all, make sure your dental floss is long enough, a few inches larger or longer than the length of your work, what's running on your needles here. And then also a good idea to tie it off so that you don't have to worry about it running through. So I'm going to go ahead and knit one more row, just so I can kind of show you. I'm going to pull this back through just a little bit so I can show you how you might pick up your stitches if you needed to. So as you knit this row, just remember this dental floss is running through here, and it might be kind of easy to snag it a little bit as you're knitting. Try not to, but it's okay if you do. It's just easier if it doesn't get tangled around your knitting. And you can kind of see as I'm knitting this, it's going to kind of get in my way a little bit. But it's just for one row, and the benefits far outweigh the little frustration you go through here. And you can see I just accidentally looped through that in knitting. So, and as you go, as it kind of gets slack, you can pull and tighten it up just a little bit so that it's out of your way a little bit more. And I have multiple tails off of this yarn because I've got more than one colorway right now in this piece of work. So you can see how that's kind of getting in my way. Again, I can just kind of tighten it up a little bit. Definitely worth the frustration. The first shawl I ever knit had chevron lace in it, and there was no really good way to mark those repeats, and it was very easy to get off. There were some complicated stitches that I wasn't used to, and probably did them wrong a few times and got off. And so inserting this lifeline before I would start those lace rows was absolutely crucial. And even though I had to pull my needles and cable out several different times, and of course that's just part of knitting, I at least did not lose the entire piece of work. So you can kind of see that's in my way. I'll work that out of my way. And you may not want to use wax floss. You may choose to use something else. But the reason I do this is because if by chance I do have to use my lifeline, then for me it's just easier to pick up the stitches with the wax than with something else, because it's easy to accidentally miss where you are, and the wax really shows up, especially if you're using dark colored yarn. So there I go. Now my floss is not in the row where my stitches are on my needle. It's on the row just down from that. And it's going to be kind of hard to see. You can kind of see it right here. You can see that little white running through there. You can see it here. So if by chance I had to pull my needle out and I had to rip back to my lifeline row, then it's really not that hard. So you just pull until you get to your faux cable, if you will. So you can see it right there. It's kind of like a cable running through. And then just as if it was a cable, you simply just run your needle right alongside of it there. And you just pick all those stitches back up. And it's going to take a minute. You know, sometimes these stitches get pulled a little tight. And when they do, it kind of has a domino effect. Then as you're picking up that one, the next one kind of gets tight. Just take your time. It's worth it to get it right. So just go slow and pick those up. And before you know it, you have all your stitches back. And so there you go. I didn't have to rip out the swatch. I was able to pick those right back up. You know, and it's really not hard to pick up a heavier weight yarn, but when you're working with fingering weight or sport weight, it gets a little harder. It's a little tricky. So a lifeline is a great idea. And even if you're knitting just garter, if you're just not all that confident about tinking back or ripping out and putting them back in, then use a lifeline. Do it every couple of inches. Then when you get a little bit more confident, then maybe it's only 4 or 5 inches. But you always have that point to rip back to, and it is so easy to do that. And even the best of the best knitters use lifelines, and if they don't, they wish they did. So anyway, that's all there is to it. Thanks.